Hi, folks. Welcome back to season 2 of the Aftermarket Champions Podcast. I'm your host, Vivek Joshi, founder and CEO of Entitle. We help equipment manufacturers identify, prioritize, and sell aftermarket and service solutions to their installed base. Insights, our purpose-built installed-based intelligence platform, is used by leading OEMs globally to drive revenue growth and improve customer experience and satisfaction. I'm delighted to be back for another enriching journey into the world of aftermarket excellence. Throughout the season, we'll engage in an insightful discussion with industry leaders, exploring innovative strategies and invaluable insights to propel us forward in the industrial aftermarket sector. So, without further ado, let's embark on this journey together. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Vivek Joshi, your host of the Aftermarket Champions Podcast, and I'm pleased to bring you another edition of our podcast with my guest today being Paul Wolf. Paul's the Director of Customer Service at R.A. Jones, which is a division of Coesia, a large Italian conglomerate of packaging and other machinery-making equipment. Paul is based in Davenport, Iowa, and that's where he comes to us today. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. I'm happy to be here.
So, Paul, I always start my show or my interview or my conversation with my guest with a very simple question. Tell us a little bit about Paul. What's your background, what you do along the way to get to this role, and then I can kind of dig into a couple more questions from there.
Sure. So I actually started out as an engineer. So I went to the University of Iowa. There's my Iowa plug.
Clark, thank you very much.
Started out in mechanical engineering and always thought I wanted to be an engineer, design things for the rest of my life. And that's where the journey started. So back in about 2000, I joined Packaging Technologies, which eventually became R.A. Jones, as a mechanical engineer, designing packaging equipment, working on Autoprod, Holmatic, sealing equipment, eventually some Keurig projects that got into coffee, but moved through engineering, a little bit of engineering management, got into some applications engineering, went into project management, and then eventually Coesia bought us 13 years later and moved into the Lean Six Sigma program. After engineering, I moved into Six Sigma, did a black belt stint, learned a lot of business process and a lot of improvements. And then on the next side of Lean Six Sigma, moved into customer service, where I thought I'd never be. I thought I'd sit and look at designs and work on equipment in my computer all day long. And they says, well, how would you like customer service? I'm like, okay, what is that? So I moved into customer service operations, worked on parts and service to start with, and really have been there since 2016, growing, learning, figuring out how to work on the business, improve the business, help customers out, engage our team into really meeting customer expectations, and really trying to push R.A. Jones into the next level of customer service, where we're really a partner with our clients and really working hard to make sure their outputs are working. When our customers are successful, we're successful. That's really where we're looking to be. So that was a 24-year journey in 30 seconds.
Interesting 24-year journey all in one shot. I think there's a couple of things that were actually of interest to me, right? So, you started as an engineer. That, interesting enough, a lot of the people I've talked to started as an engineer, but unlike most, and I think you might be one of two that I've talked to, who journeyed into this whole realm of Six Sigma. I mean, I did Six Sigma a long time ago when I was at this big company on the East Coast, right, that made it popular. But that was an interesting switch for you, right? And then more importantly, as from an engineer to Six Sigma to customer service, did that have any role to play in your shift of focus or career, if you may, Paul?
Yeah, it really did. As an engineer, I was never a real good designer. I was more a hands-on, make things work. So once we built all the equipment here in the building. Once the machine was built and ready to start up, I was good at figuring out how to make it work efficiently. And my drive is in how to make things work better. And so from engineering, I did a lot of startups and helped in the field, and then learned how equipment work, learned some of the electrical logic. I always thought I could have been a good programmer too, because I'm kind of logical. But Lean Six Sigma was a journey where they said, hey, do you want to do the black belt program? And I said, sure. What's that? So, and they introduced it to me. It was the start of Coesia's Black Belt program, and really learned about process, learned about statistics, and I never realized how much I enjoy data and calculation and looking at trends, looking at visualizations of, where the highs and lows are, and figuring out how processes work through data. And it was a neat exposure to me. And I use that all the time now because the data is everywhere. And as we move into a much more digital world, big data, there is a lot of information to go through. And if you can harness it and really utilize it to say, hey, here's the important stuff, here's the noise, and say, hey, here's the things we need to change to make things better. Here's the stuff we can ignore. I think the Lean Six Sigma really gives you a tool to look at data in a different light, because you're looking for facts, you're looking for things that exist in the world and trying to translate that into improvements and results on equipment. And so I think that gives you a base of relationship to looking at the data. A lot of things say, hey, we're doing this. It says, oh, great, nice chart. Can I see the data? Because I want to analyze it, because there's different ways to look at things. So I think that has really given me the opportunity to look at lots of big picture items, but break it down into a very methodical data approach and looking for results based on actual events versus, I think we should kind of go this way. So I think it's really where it takes me to. I say, oh, it's a good idea. Let's check the data to make sure we're right.
It's interesting you said that, right? Because when I did Six Sigma a long time ago, I think there are two things that I remember that stuck in my mind. One is you mentioned about the process, the ability to kind of follow that thing. The other one is data. But maybe there's a third thing that I think I took away. To me, Six Sigma or Black, being in that realm of Six Sigma was all about making processes more robust to have consistent output in the face of maybe varying input, right? Which I think which is like the meta lesson out of that. How does that translate, that mindset, if you may, translate into the customer service world? Because as you said to us before we started this conversation, a happy customer is really where you want to be, and happiness is as much about consistency of experience as anything else, right? Is that how you guys thinking about it as well?
Absolutely. The real mindset that you get to is most of our happy customers have boring jobs because the machines are boringly predictable. I put anything in it, and at the end of the day, I get the same output. Machine and product is flowing out the door, going to their customers. So boringly predictable is where you want to get to. And if you look at variations and changes, and if you can make machines boringly predictable through proper maintenance, proper cleaning, proper training, replacement parts when you need to, and just make that machine just run, and now it becomes a boring job, that's where you want to get to, because those are happy customers. When they're sitting at their line staring at the machine saying, well, what do I do now? Well, I guess I'll just sit here and watch it run.
Right.
Those are the kind of customers. The operators get bored, and the output just keeps going. So, yeah, when you talk about a lot of variation coming in, but it's boringly predictable is what you really want to be at for machine functionality, and that's what we try to get to. How do we make it so it never stops, and when it does stop, we know exactly what to do?
When you think about the other word you used to describe that role in between, you said Lean and Six Sigma, right? So Lean was obviously, popularized a long time ago with some of the Japanese movements out there. To some degree, Six Sigma too, with Deming and everybody else. But the Lean movement also wound up manifesting itself in the form of these quote unquote business system kind of mindsets, right? The famous ones, Danaher business system, and it spawned off a whole bunch of different things. Is that something, a philosophy that Coesia has adopted as well, or Ari Jones particularly, or is that a way to kind of make it work together?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the times you say Lean Six Sigma, and people, Six Sigma is a lot of data, which I like. Lean is a lot of waste management. I mean, how do you get rid of waste? How do you eliminate extra cost? How do you get waste, waste in movement, waste in packaging? How do you get rid of it? So when I think about Lean Six Sigma, a majority of the times you start at Lean and you start at waste elimination. What are the costs I can get rid of? Because those are Lean is actually easier than Six Sigma. Repeatability is a lot harder than starting at the beginning. So when I look at Lean Six Sigma, most of the time we start at Lean and we look at cost management and what extra costs do I have that I can get rid of? What are the business requirements? What are the customer requirements? And then everything else I can get rid of to reduce cost, reduce time, and build more efficiency in the line. So when you really break down Lean Six Sigma, lean really has a much bigger use when you start with customers, when you start in a plant. But Six Sigma repeatability is great, but you really got to start with the lean. If you don't have lean,
You can't make it.
repeatability just isn't even going to be there. So yeah,
So it is good because then you translate that into your customer service role, both first in operations and now running the customer service or service business. Clearly the intended Coesia broadly and R.A. Jones and the division, I think CS&M is the division name, if I remember correctly.
CMS, right? Yeah.
CMS, right. You guys are all trying to make sure you embed that mindset and philosophy across the entire company and the division in particular. How's that journey been for you for the last 8 years? I know it's been a lot of things you guys have been doing over time. Obviously, today versus 2016 is different. How's that journey been for you guys and you in particular, Paul?
It, you know, I've learned so much in the last 8 years that I've been in customer service. So, but the journey has always been going strong, always growing. Learn how customers react. There was COVID in the middle of this journey, so there's 2 years lost in just trying to let's stop for a second and figure out how to get the world back on track, and then now let's start the journey again. But throughout the time frame, I generally see the packaging world as a lagging industry. The technology is not cutting edge. Automotive has a lot of that. Aerospace has a lot of the cutting edge. Packaging is following up on some of the technology. So packaging starts to see things that are happening in the world and really progressing from the break fix mindset. If it's broken, I need to fix it. I'll run it till it breaks and then fix it, to the getting closer to the preventative maintenance, to the planned downtime. You get to predictably boring. So that transition has been, I've seen the transition in some of our customers, some of the industries we serve throughout the last 8 years, and it's just kind of passing through industry by industry, getting to that mindset of really planning your downtime as opposed to break fixing. The companies we started with, years ago, we were when Packaging Technologies was in Davenport, absorbed some companies. A lot of the smaller companies were you run until it breaks, you bring in a service tech and you fix it with parts, and then you get up and running again so you can get production out. And that's transformed over the course of in the last 8 years, I've seen it to the mindset of, well, if I replace it early, I'm spending a little more on parts, but I get a lot more production. It's really focusing on that output where the high dollar is. Saving money on parts is very small compared to having more production, more efficiency, and more output with the same cost. If you can get 10 more an hour out of a machine with the same cost, minus the packaging and the cost of materials, they're making more money. So that's what we want to focus on. How do you make sure you're very predictable? You plan your maintenance, you do it at the right time, so it actually helps them plan their production and improve. So yeah, it's there. It's been a change, and a lot of people are changing that mindset. I get a lot more requests for this longer term planning. Hey, can you do monthly preventative maintenance versus, hey, I need a tech here tomorrow because we just broke something. Can you audit my machine to make sure it's going to keep running for the next year versus, hey, we need a shaft flown to us, I'll pay $1 million because I need production tomorrow. So it's that balance of emergency to predictability.
And I think that's actually going back to your Six Sigma mindset. Six Sigma is about predictability, boring predictability, like you said, and getting your customers to that point also helps level load your resources as well, right? So it's helping both sides reduce waste in the system, like you said. So it's all connected to one another.
Yeah. Because we are running out of people a lot of the time, so it's hard to find a lot of people right now. A lot of harder to hire people these days. So yeah, you got to do more with less. Everybody does.
So it's funny you said that, right? Because one of the questions I was going to ask you, which was related to that, is I actually did a webinar yesterday. Of course, there's a bit of marketing. I call it the autonomous aftermarket, right? And the idea behind the autonomous aftermarket is, A, to make it boringly predictable or predictably boring, but also to address the fact what you just said, Paul, is almost everybody I talk to in your shoes, and and even the equipment side people are having a huge issue with two things. One is, people like me, we're retiring. My age is retiring. Lots of guys getting out of the workforce. Lots of people getting into the workforce, but the generation behind them is not coming in the volumes and qualities, the skills that you expect. And so it's created this little capacity and capability crunch right now in almost every single manufacturer. And the idea to use data, to use automation, to use intelligence to kind of overcome some of those gaps is a big deal. Is that how you guys are thinking about it also, Ari Jones and even Coesia broadly?
Yeah, I think everybody's thinking of it that way because it's just our current reality. But there's more and more plants where the guy who has been there for 45 years knows everything about the machine, has all the parts stored away in his office. Oh, that broke. I have one of those. Is disappearing and it's being replaced from somebody that's has less experience, much younger, grew up in a different mentality. The guys that have been there for years, they worked on their cars. They changed their own oil. We don't change our oil anymore today, and some kids have cars that don't have oil; they're electric now. You don't do oil changes. So
Right.
the world is changing. You find in the past, if you needed information, you had to go look it up. You had to go to the library, and it was so much effort to find the information. Now I have to retain it. Nowadays, I can go to my phone and I can know something in 2 seconds, but I don't remember it tomorrow because I don't have to because my phone knows it. So we're finding more people are better at indexing information from a source than they are at remembering information. So how do you make that information readily available to somebody who's used to finding it right away? I may have to look it up every time, but something else is remembering it for me. So indexing information becomes more important than remembering information. And now you get into, okay, how do I present that information in a way that my customer can utilize it with the operators who are younger and they need to index it faster versus remembering it? How do I train people to do that? And how do I get them to do it more often and faster? And then you step into how can I get the machine to think for itself, to say, hey, you should probably adjust this thing because I feel vibration in the machine. I mean, this is where you're getting into, a machine that's a smart machine that can give you hints on what to do next. Or you put your Google glasses on, you walk up and there's a note that says you need to do these 5 things. Well, I don't know how to do that. Well, let me get my phone out and I can find it. So we're moving into that market, and there's a high turnover, a lot of fluidity in the human capital in the market. People are moving all over, changing jobs more often, working less. So how do you train people faster, provide the information faster, and really replace the veterans who know everything about the machine with people who know how to find information? They're mechanically skilled or they can run the machine, but they need to find the information quickly. So we're working through that. It's a struggle. It's a different mindset. But that's the next group, the next generation that'll take over. They can index information, not necessarily remember it or have done it before. So that's my son was the same way. He said I needed to fix my dryer. And he says, well, why don't you just look up a YouTube video and do it instead of calling the repairman? So I looked up a YouTube video and I watched it and I'm like, oh, I can do that. And I did it. And I'm like, hey, I fixed my dryer. So, but do I remember what I did? No, because it was on a YouTube video. If I need to do it again, I go look up the video. So there's a lot of struggle with how we deal with that, how we change our mindset, how we train operators, train mechanics, and really enable them to do things with the technology we have today. There's a lot of places they're like, oh, you can't have your phone in production because it's a distraction. You're not going to work. And now it's like, well, you have to have your phone because you need the information on it.
That's right.
So making that information available and utilizing it is the next ways of smart machines and how we actually running the world. So
That's right. I love the fact that the term you use, I'm going to borrow this term, indexing information versus remembering information. I think that's really powerful because you're right. The first thing people do now, just like you, I do the same thing. I'll automatically go do a YouTube search for stuff that breaks in the house, right? Because it's the easiest thing. Somebody's put a video on how to fix it. What's interesting, and this is a slightly different direction for this conversation but if you just think about what you said about your washer experience or dryer experience in YouTube, do you see that in your customer base where people are saying, hey, Ari Jones, why don't you guys put some repair videos online so I can quickly look and see things? Because maybe there's somebody who's skilled and talented enough to do it and they don't have to wait for your technician to show up. It's both good and bad, right? Good as in you make information and knowledge available. Bad, there may be one less service call on behalf of Ari Jones, which is revenue, but you may have a happier customer because they had that. Are you seeing that shift at all?
We do see that. We're seeing the request for more animation, more video content.
Fascinating.
Less classroom training is probably a thing of the past. People don't do as much classroom training. They want to do hands-on. I need to see it, touch it, but they also want to see a video of it. And training by video versus training by reading. We used to read everything because there weren't any videos. Now we want to see videos. So it does go that way, and customers ask for it. And how do you bridge the gap of providing content and then still maintaining a successful business? I mean, if you give away all your intellectual property, it's a problem. But if you don't transform to what the current market needs, you have problems too. So to be a good vendor to our customers, I mean, we got to provide that information. We got to show them how to use it. We've got to make it available. And how do you control it? How do you access it? Then you get to, you're starting to get to Chat GBT and this artificial intelligence stuff. Suddenly, if something has all that information, you could have people servicing machines without any help. So it's a different world we live in. So, but I like to think that even if people have the information, they still work with us because we provide value. We help them do other things and help them really grow. So that's what we're focusing on. But it's a different world. It's always changing and it's growing faster and faster. So content, indexing information, controlling it, it's all moving forward. People are asking for it. It's where we're going.
It's the other point you made, which is interesting, and I've heard people say that, but I think I think you may be saying this explicitly as well, which is it's one thing to have your 45-year veteran who has the parts stored in some catalogs and some drawings stored in his or her cabinet somewhere, but you have the same picture happening on the operator side and on the end customer side, because there have been people who are running these machines for a long time. They've just been running the same machines for a long time. They have all that stuff stored in the head, and now the next generation coming and doesn't. And so it's fascinating to see the shift on both the vendor side and the customer side, where the worlds are going to basically, maybe collide is the wrong word, but definitely wind up converging, where this change is going to create a need for service to get delivered differently, right, going forward.
Yeah, it's a different world. What is useful to the customer? A lot of our customers, they just want a service tech to show up because they don't have capacity to work on their machines. So they need more capacity. They need people. And then sometimes it's the knowledge base. But some of our, we've got senior service techs that have been doing it for 30 years, and when they leave, we're going to lose the knowledge and self. And I always tell them, say, I'm just going to plug you into the matrix, we'll suck your brain out, so now we have all your information. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So you interview them, you have them build videos, you have people write it down. If you can get it written, if you can get it transcribed, if somehow get the information that people have into a format that people can find, that's where the world is moving to. You got to have the information available, but in somebody's head just doesn't work until we start planting chips in heads and they can read their brain. But brave new world there. But it's finding information and getting it out of people. We've got the same problem internally. People who are retiring and they've got lots of information, and you've got to really plan for that. You've got to figure out how to capture the good morsels and tidbits that they have in their head that they've done for years that they've really never told anybody about. And if you don't get them, then you got to relearn them. But once you learn them, you got to write them down or capture them somewhere. So everybody has that problem. So people keep retiring. So.
That's right. Now, when you think about what you just described, I think there's a picture for Ari Jones today is what I'm hearing. Now, Coesia, you guys are very active, I think, overall as a company in terms of sharing these best practices, having some form of harmonization of these ideas. How does that work across the larger company? I think there's 14 or 15 different group companies, right? Or maybe there's more. No,
there's actually 20. So I think it's, So yeah, it's several.
Yeah.
So, but we've Coesia is really, it's a packaging company, so everybody knows packaging, and we like to leverage our companies in a way that how do we make sure people have consistent practices? How do you have one way of doing things? Really getting to the when you talk to R.A. Jones, when you talk to Coesia, you're getting this one standard of service, and on a global company, global basis, there's multiple regions we have, cultures are different. So really understanding the difference in regions versus the difference in company and presenting a consistent approach. It's a complicated way to do business, but we're maneuvering through it and figuring out how to really get that consistent approach. And really, if you want a packaging partner, we have Coesia here. We can be a packaging partner and we can support you around the world. That's really where the vision is, and we work together all the time and are getting closer and closer. So the world gets smaller once you have a lot of teams. Right. COVID actually made the world smaller. Right. So we used to travel to see each other. Now we just turn on the video and talk. So
that's right.
It's a different world.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of different things that have happened in the last 4 years. They said COVID made us kind of operate differently. I'm sitting in my co-working space today. I almost never come here because it's easy for me to turn on my computer and my Teams and start the morning off from home office, right? But if you consider some of those things you just talked about, which is the changes in the customers and how they think about stuff, the changes in the workforce, data and rigor and process discipline, if you may, with some of the things you guys are doing. If I were to ask you, say, Paul, if you think back, not just in the last 8 years in customer service, but you've been observing service and customer service now for 20 years, at the R.A. Jones Coesia companies. What's your take on what sets apart what I would call an aftermarket champion, somebody who's doing certain things really well, be it, a systematic way of growing, systematic way of delivering of service, and so on and so forth, versus the examples you've seen in your professional career as the people who don't do such a good job. But what's your take on the champions versus not?
So that's a strong question. But I think the real side that you have to get to is, what does the customer need? What does the customer want? What is their expectations? We've dabbled in agile a little bit too, customer feedback, customer response. Every time I go somewhere or do something, or on my phone, somebody sends me a survey and says, hey, how good did we do? That's right. But that continuous feedback loop, and really not just getting the feedback, but listening to it, embracing it, and understanding it, really makes the champion stand out. People collect information, and if you collect information and don't do anything with it, your customer isn't satisfied. Mm-hmm. So I think what really, really makes, it's customer service. You got to deal with the customers. You need to listen. You need to react to them. You need to work with them. You need to communicate with them. It really is focused on how the customer success is managed and how we can enable that customer success, versus the people that haven't quite got there yet. Is like, well, everybody's in the business. It's my business success. How can I be successful in my business versus how can my customer be successful in their business? And once you transition from your own success to the customer success, suddenly your business actually becomes more successful. But it's that measurement. The finance people want to know how your business is doing, but the customers, when they're successful, they actually give you more business, so you do better. So it's a matter of really focusing on how successful your companies are, what do they need, and adapting to what you're hearing, and really building your strategy on enabling them to be successful. Right. I think that really gets to the point of how can you be successful.
And I think that's something important that I've heard from multiple of my guests, which is the ability to make sure you focus on what makes your customer successful is important. The other thing, and I think that applies to you as well, Paul, for the products R.A. Jones makes, which is the machines you make, the packaging machines you make last for 10, 15 years in your customer base, right? There's some of these old machines out there. And, customer service is probably the only touch point that consistently stays connected to your customer over time, right? The equipment people go, do a one-time big sale for $1 million, $2 million, whatever it might be, a set of lines, and then they go away. Yes, they treat them as special customers, but your group, your team, is the one that's constantly in touch and delivering that experience, delivering that success. And I think that's really the aspect of service I think people need to keep in mind as well. Yeah,
and people have lots of names for it, but we call it asset management, but it's the life cycle of the equipment. You'll spend 2 years, 6 months, 9 months buying capital equipment, and that's a whole group of people. But now we're expecting it to run for 20. We're servicing machines that are 50 years old, so
Wow.
some that are a year old. But it's a matter of how do you maintain the asset, how do you make it run, and maintaining that communication and touch point, and really looking at your customers and understanding what they need. Some of them like to do it themselves. Some of them like to do it with help. Some of them like to have you do it for them, and understanding what they need, but really letting them understand we're here to help. And this machine's going to be around a while. So, hey, let's get to know each other and let's really build that relationship, because their production keeps going, and that's what they're in business to do. So we're in business to help them keep going.
That's right. Paul, this has been a great conversation, and almost with every one of my guests, I actually like to end with my favorite question, because I'm a big podcast listener as well. And one of my favorite podcasts is a person called Guy Raz, and his question always to his guests is like, "Hey, in the spectrum of luck to good looks to amazing talent, how much do you ascribe to where you are today, to luck versus talent versus hard work?" Right? I mean, what's your point of view on that one?
And I would have to say there's some of all of that, and it's call it luck, call it fate, right place, right time. There's definitely times when things just happen. A lot of my employees ask, well, how come we're not doing this yet? I says, well, we have to be patient and wait until the company's ready to do it. But being at the right place at the right time is a bit of luck.
Yeah.
But hard work, effort, paying attention, learning new things, creating, self-awareness. How do I react to things? How do people react to things? Learning from each situation, how businesses function, how people function. You embrace that and you learn from it. So if you continually learn, sometimes you make your own luck, because if you get that right situation and you say the wrong thing, it doesn't go anywhere. If you get the right situation, say the right thing, it does go somewhere. So I really think it's a mix. I think we're all working through our individual realities. We're embracing other people, and it comes down to when you find the right people to work with, you give your high level of effort and everything you have and share that. I think you become successful when you take that approach, and really you listen to people, you work with people, and you share your ideas, and the luck just kind of happens sometimes. So it's been a great journey. I think it's some of both. So I wouldn't say, and it's definitely not my good looks. So I got looks for radio, probably.
That's right. That's a great one. That's a great way to it. Looks for radio. Well, I think this was awesome. Paul, thank you so much for that great insights. I really think in terms of the kinds of things we talked about, which is the process disciplines, the data rigor, it's making customers caring about their success first and foremost, right? And this whole process, and removing waste from the system is a really good way to kind of capture a lot of the mindset, if you may, that you guys bring to customer service. So this has been a great conversation. I appreciate it very much. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate it as well. So thanks for your time today. Really.
Yeah, happy to be here. Enjoyed the conversation.
As we complete another enlightening episode, I extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed guests and you, our valued listeners. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Play, or simply visit our website at www.entitled.com for more enriching content. Remember, the pursuit of aftermarket excellence is an ongoing journey, and I look forward to continuing with you. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and continue championing aftermarket success.